Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Ariana Reyes. The story I'm about to tell you is about a marriage, a career, and the moment I realized that sometimes the most patronizing insult can become the key to your greatest triumph. It's the story of how my own husband and his powerful family tried to shrink me into a pretty little hobbyist, and how a simple, dismissive gift, a cheap rock from a hotel gift shop, ended up fueling a clean energy revolution they never saw coming. It was the sweetest revenge, not because it was loud and explosive, but because it was quiet, undeniable, and built on the very expertise they laughed at. Before I dive into how I turned their condescension into a multi-million-dollar state contract that made their entire fossil fuel empire look like a dinosaur, I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you've ever been underestimated or made to feel small, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. For all the new viewers here, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell, because this community is built for people who know the power of rewriting their own story. It all began, as so many cautionary tales do, with love. Or what I had convinced myself was love. I met Elijah Vance during the final grueling months of my doctoral program in geology, specializing in volcanology and geothermal systems. I was living in a world of seismic data, rock strata, and the Earth's deep, fiery core. My life was a comfortable, dusty clutter of academic papers, field samples, and the smell of old books. Elijah was different. He was like a character from a movie about Wall Street. He wore impeccably tailored suits, had a smile that could disarm a hostile board meeting, and spoke with an easy, confident charisma that felt worlds away from the careful, peer-reviewed language of my colleagues. He was the son of Arthur Vance, a name that carried immense weight in the energy sector. Arthur was a senior board member at Titan Energy, one of the country's largest and most powerful oil and gas conglomerates. Elijah was being groomed to follow in his father's footsteps, and his ambition was palpable. It was intoxicating. He'd pursued me with a startling intensity. He found my work fascinating, or so he claimed. "So you're a rock doctor," he joked on our first date, but his eyes held a spark of what I mistook for genuine curiosity. "You study what the world is made of. That's incredible." I, who had spent years defending my field against dismissive remarks, felt seen. He listened as I explained the intricate dance of tectonic plates and the immense, clean power waiting to be harnessed from the planet's own heat. He made me feel like my passion wasn't just some niche academic pursuit, but something powerful and important. I was swept off my feet by the sheer force of his attention. We married less than a year later in a lavish ceremony that felt more like a corporate merger than a union of two souls. His family, the Vances, were polite but distant, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. They looked at me as if I were a curious acquisition of Elijah's, a rare bird he'd brought home to adorn his cage. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was in love, and love, I believed, could bridge any gap. Shortly after our honeymoon, as I was polishing my dissertation and fielding offers from universities and research institutions, Elijah sat me down in the sleek, minimalist living room of our new home, a home his father had gifted us. The white walls and sharp angles felt sterile, a stark contrast to the comfortable chaos of my old apartment. "Ari, darling," he began, taking my hands in his. His touch, which once sent a thrill through me, now felt like a negotiation. "I've been thinking about your career, about our future." He went on to say how proud he was of my accomplishments, my doctorate, my brilliant mind. The words were all correct, but they felt rehearsed. Then came the pitch. "My father and I were talking," he said, a phrase I would come to dread. "There's a position opening up in the geology department at Titan. It's a junior role, of course, just to get your foot in the door. But it would be perfect. We could commute together. We'd be in the same world." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Titan Energy. Fossil fuel giant. My entire academic career had been dedicated to finding cleaner, more sustainable alternatives. Working for them felt like a betrayal of my own principles. I tried to explain this gently. "Elijah, that's very thoughtful. But my expertise is in geothermal energy, volcanology, Titan is an oil and gas company. It's not really my field. He smiled that patient, placating smile of his. Think of it as a stepping stone, Ari. You're a geologist. They need geologists. You can learn the ropes, understand the business from the inside. And who knows? Maybe you could even steer them in a new direction someday. The idea was seductive. The thought of being a force for change within a corporate behemoth. It was a fantasy, but it was a beautiful one. Besides, he added, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper, it would make my father so happy. It would show him we're a team. A real power couple. And there it was. The real reason. It wasn't about my career. It was about his. My presence at the company would be a testament to his influence, a symbol of his ability to manage all aspects of his life, including his brilliant but eccentric academic wife. I felt a flicker of resentment, but I suppressed it. I loved him. I wanted to make him happy. I wanted to be part of his world. So, against my better judgment, against the screaming voice of my intuition, I agreed. I accepted the junior geologist position at Titan Energy, convincing myself I was being pragmatic. In reality, it was the first of 1,000 compromises. The first time I willingly chiseled away a piece of myself to fit into a space where I never truly belonged. My first day at Titan Energy felt like stepping onto a different planet. The headquarters was a monument of steel and smoked glass, a cathedral dedicated to profit. The air hummed with a low, aggressive energy. Men in identical dark suits moved with a predatory confidence, their voices sharp and decisive. My small office was sterile and impersonal, a far cry from the vibrant, paper-strewn labs I was used to. Elijah walked me to my desk, his arm possessively around my shoulder. Just remember the advice I gave you, he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. Don't come on too strong. These guys are old school. Ease into it. Don't rock the boat. Don't rock the boat. The phrase would become my mantra, my cage. It meant don't be too smart. Don't ask too many questions. Don't challenge the status quo. In short, don't be me. I began to perform a carefully calibrated version of myself. I learned to downplay my PhD. When someone asked about my background, I'd just say, "Oh, I studied geology." I stopped using precise terminology, translating complex concepts into what the executives called bottom-line thinking. Seismic resonance became good vibrations. Tectonic stress models became pressure points. I felt like I was speaking a pidgin version of my own language, and with every simplified phrase, a part of my intellectual confidence eroded. I was Dr. Ariana Reyes, an expert in my field, but at Titan I was just Ari, Elijah's wife, the girl who liked rocks. The welcome lunch my father-in-law, Arthur Vance, threw for me was the official beginning of my erasure. It was held in the company's exclusive executive dining room, a place of dark wood, hushed tones and obsequious waiters. Arthur, a man who commanded every room he entered, stood to make a toast. He had a full head of silver hair, a booming voice, and eyes that assessed everyone and everything for their utility. To Elijah, he began, raising his glass, for continuing to show impeccable judgment, both in business and in life, and to his lovely bride, Ari. Welcome to the family. He gave me a brief, dismissive nod. My doctorate, my years of research, my entire professional identity, all of it was condensed into 2 words. Lovely bride. Throughout the lunch, he and his colleagues spoke around me, their conversation a blur of market caps, drilling rights, and political maneuvering. When Arthur finally did turn his attention to me, it was with an air of amused indulgence. So, Elijah tells me you're quite the rock collector, he said, a chuckle rumbling in his chest. A few of the other executives smirked. I felt my face flush. I'm a geologist, Arthur, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I study geological formations and energy sources. He waved a dismissive hand. Yes, of course. Wonderful. You must tell us where to find some pretty ones for the office lobby. I looked to Elijah for support, but he was deep in conversation with another executive, laughing at some shared joke. He hadn't even noticed the casual, gutting humiliation. I picked at my food, my appetite gone, a cold realization dawning on me. I wasn't a colleague here. I was a curiosity. Mascot. My first project assignment confirmed my fears. I was handed a stack of dusty boxes containing old core samples from a field that had been drilled dry a decade earlier. My task was to recatalog them. It was grunt work, a project typically given to a summer intern to keep them out of the way. Mark, my direct supervisor and a man whose greatest ambition seemed to be pleasing Arthur Vance, presented it to me as a crucial task. "This is a great way for you to get a feel for our historical assets, Ari," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to show him my dissertation, to explain the complex geothermal modeling I was capable of. Instead, I smiled back and said, "It sounds like a great place to start. Thank you, Mark." I threw myself into the demeaning task with a desperate, misplaced professionalism. I analyzed the mineral composition, noted the sedimentary layers, and cross-referenced the old drilling logs. I discovered microscopic fossil evidence that suggested the field's original dating had been slightly off, a minor academic point but a testament to my thoroughness. I compiled my findings into a detailed report, complete with spectrographic analysis and high-resolution microscopic images. I was proud of it, a small act of defiance against the box they were trying to put me in. I submitted it to Mark. A week later, I saw it in a recycling bin, unread, a coffee ring staining the cover page. That same day, an all-hands email went out congratulating Elijah on a brilliantly insightful presentation he'd given on third-quarter market trends. His presentation, I knew, consisted of 3 slides he'd borrowed from the marketing department and a few talking points I had helped him refine the night before. The applause for him was deafening. The silence surrounding my own work was absolute. The lines between my professional and personal life began to blur into one continuous landscape of quiet dismissal. Our home, which should have been a sanctuary, became another stage for my performance as the non-threatening, supportive wife. We hosted a dinner party for some of Arthur's colleagues and their spouses. The men gathered in one corner of the living room, talking loudly about oil futures, while the women were herded into the other, discussing caterers and vacation spots. I felt trapped between 2 worlds, belonging to neither. Trying to bridge the gap, I attempted to engage Arthur's group. I had just read a fascinating new paper on the geothermal potential of the very region where Titan held most of its assets. The study suggested that deep Earth heat gradients were far more intense than previously believed. "Arthur," I began, stepping into the circle of men, "I was just reading a study that suggests significant geothermal potential right here in the state. The implications for clean energy are enormous." A brief, uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Arthur turned to me, a look of paternalistic amusement on his face. He patted my arm. "That's lovely, dear," he said, his voice laced with condescension. "That's very academic. But we deal in real energy here. The kind that built this country, the kind that powers the world. We don't have time for tourist trap hot springs." His friends let out a collective, knowing chuckle. They saw me as a child, interrupting the adult conversation with a fanciful notion. My cheeks burned with shame. I looked for Elijah, my husband, my partner, my supposed champion. He was standing right beside his father. He didn't defend me. He didn't even acknowledge the validity of my point. Instead, he smoothly, expertly changed the subject. "Speaking of power," he said with a grin, "Dad, you have to tell them about the deal you closed in Houston." As the conversation shifted, he shot me a quick, sharp look. It wasn't a look of sympathy. It was a look of pure annoyance. "You're rocking the boat," it said. "Stop it." I retreated to the other side of the room, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I had never felt so utterly alone. The final straw of that early period, the one that truly drove home the hopelessness of my situation, came from a piece of my own work. While performing the menial task of digitizing old geological surveys, another mind-numbing project designed to keep me busy, I stumbled upon an anomaly. It was in the data for a large tract of land in the northern part of the state, an area Titan had acquired decades ago in a larger land deal and subsequently written off as geologically inert and worthless. The company had held on to it for tax purposes, but it was considered a dead asset. But the data I was looking at told a different story. The old seismic readings, when run through modern analytical software, showed a subsurface heat gradient that was anything but inert. It was faint, easily missed with the technology of the time, but to my trained eye, it was a flashing red light. It was the signature of a potential deep earth geothermal source. A massive one. My heart pounded with the thrill of discovery. This wasn't just a minor correction. This could be a paradigm shift for the company. A new, clean, and immensely profitable revenue stream hiding in plain sight. I spent the next 2 weeks working obsessively, staying late at the office, using my own personal software on my laptop to model the data. My findings were conclusive. The potential was staggering. This worthless plot of land was sitting on top of a geological goldmine. Bursting with excitement, I showed my preliminary report to Elijah that evening. I spread the printouts across our granite kitchen island, the same cold, sterile surface where we ate our silent breakfasts. "Look at this," I said, my voice trembling with adrenaline. "It's the North Ridge property. The one everyone ignores. The heat signature is off the charts. Elijah, this could change everything for Titan. We could lead the transition to clean energy." He picked up the report, his expression unreadable. He skimmed the executive summary, his eyes flicking over the charts and graphs that represented weeks of my life. He didn't seem to grasp the significance. His focus was elsewhere. "The North Ridge property," he said slowly, putting the report down. "Dad's old exploration division under Arthur Sr. was the one that wrote that land off 30 years ago. They staked their reputation on that assessment." He looked at me, and his eyes were cold. "Ari, you need to be very careful with this. If you bring this to the board, it will look like you're telling them that my grandfather and his entire team were incompetent. It will look like you, the new girl, the outsider, are questioning the very foundation of this company." I stared at him, my excitement draining away, replaced by a chilling clarity. "But the data is the data, Elijah. It's not about who was right or wrong then. It's about what's possible now." He sighed, the sound of a man burdened by his wife's naivete. "That's not how it works here, and you know it. It's about politics. It's about perception. Bringing this up will be seen as an attack. You'll alienate my father. You'll make powerful enemies." He picked up the report and slid it back towards me. "Let it go, Ari. For your own good. For our good." He wasn't protecting me. He was managing a problem. He was silencing a disruptive variable that threatened his smooth, upward trajectory. I looked from his handsome, impassive face to the report in my hands. A document that held the potential for a cleaner future. A document that represented the pinnacle of my expertise. And in that moment, I did the one thing I would come to regret more than anything else. Back down. I slid the report into my briefcase, took it home, and buried it in the bottom of my desk drawer. I had let him convince me that my silence was a form of self-preservation. I didn't yet understand that it was a form of self-destruction. The isolation I felt at Titan became a physical ache. I was a ghost haunting the hallways of my own life, my voice unheard, my skills invisible. The chasm between who I was and who I was pretending to be grew wider each day. I found myself scrolling through the contact list on my phone one lonely evening, my thumb hovering over a name I hadn't called in years. Dr. Lena Petrova. Lena had been my PhD advisor, a formidable woman with a mind as sharp as a shard of obsidian and a reputation for not suffering fools. She was a legend in the world of geology, a Russian émigré who had fought her way to the top of a male-dominated field with nothing but her ferocious intellect and an unshakable belief in empirical evidence. She had been my mentor, my champion, and, at times, my harshest critic. Calling her felt like a risk. It meant admitting that the brilliant future she had predicted for me had curdled into a corporate nightmare. Swallowing my pride, I dialed her number. We met for coffee at a small, cluttered cafe near the university, a world away from the gleaming austerity of Titan's headquarters. The smell of roasted coffee and old paperbacks was a balm to my soul. Lena looked exactly the same. Her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes missing nothing. She listened patiently as the entire story poured out of me. The job, the condescension, Elijah's warnings, Arthur's pretty rock jokes, the suppressed report on the North Ridge property. I felt pathetic, my voice cracking with unshed tears. When I finally finished, she took a slow sip of her espresso, her gaze unwavering. "So," she said, her Russian accent making the words sound like a final judgment, "you have allowed these primitive, fossil-obsessed men to turn you into a decoration." The words were blunt, but they were not unkind. They were a diagnosis. "Ariana," she continued, leaning forward, her voice low and intense, "I did not spend 5 years sharpening your mind for you to use it to catalog dust. You are one of the most brilliant, intuitive geologists I have ever had the privilege to teach. A doctorate is not a lapel pin for your husband's suit. It is a weapon. You have forgotten how to use it." The shame I felt was immense, but it was quickly overshadowed by a profound sense of relief. She saw me. She remembered who I was. Her validation was like water in a desert. "That report you wrote," she said, her eyes gleaming. "The one you buried in a drawer. Do you still have it?" I nodded mutely. "Good," she said, a fierce smile touching her lips. "You will continue that research. In secret. On your own time. You will use your own equipment. You will build an unassailable case. Data, Ariana. Data is the only truth that matters. Let them have their little boys' club. You will build an empire on the ground they were too arrogant to look at." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of the old fire. Lena hadn't just offered sympathy. She had given me a mission. Armed with Lena's clandestine support, I began to live a double life. By day, I was Ari, the quiet, agreeable junior geologist at Titan, performing my token tasks with a placid smile. By night, I was Dr. Reyes, a scientist on the brink of a major discovery. I converted a corner of my home office into a secret command center. I bought a new, high-powered laptop and specialized software, paying for it with my own money. I spent hours cross-referencing my initial findings with public satellite imagery, magnetic field surveys, and historical water table data. The picture became clearer, more detailed, more astonishing with every piece of new information. The North Ridge property wasn't just sitting on a geothermal source. It was sitting on one of the largest and most stable subterranean heat reservoirs in the entire continent. It was a geological anomaly of epic proportions, a clean energy bomb waiting to be detonated. The work was my salvation. It was the only part of my life where I felt truly myself. Meanwhile, the humiliations at Titan continued to escalate, each one a fresh layer of salt in a festering wound. A senior geologist position opened up in a different division, one focused on forward-looking energy strategies. It was a long shot, but the job description seemed to be written for me. It required expertise in alternative energy modeling and subsurface heat flow analysis. It was a chance, I thought, to finally prove my worth on their terms. I spent a week polishing my resume, carefully phrasing my skills to sound impressive but not threatening. I applied. The interview was a farce. The hiring manager, a vice president named Henderson, glanced at my resume for a total of 10 seconds. He asked me 2 perfunctory questions, then spent the rest of the time talking about his last golf trip with Arthur Vance. "So, you're Elijah's wife," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smug little smile. "He's a great kid. A real rising star." He didn't ask me a single substantive question about my research, my skills, or my vision. The interview was over in less than 15 minutes. 2 days later, a company-wide email announced that the position had been filled by a man named Todd, a geologist whose main qualification appeared to be his single-digit golf handicap and his close friendship with Henderson's son. When I told Elijah, he just shrugged, his eyes glued to the stock ticker on his phone. "It's just politics, babe," he said, the words utterly devoid of empathy. "Henderson and Todd are golf buddies. It's how the game is played. Your time will come. His nonchalance was more painful than open mockery. He didn't see the injustice because, in his world, it wasn't an injustice. It was just business as usual. He had no concept of merit, only of connections. He couldn't see that my time would never come in a game that was so profoundly, fundamentally rigged against me. The ultimate proof of that rigged game came a few months later. Elijah was given a massive promotion, elevated to Vice President of Strategic Development. He was the youngest VP in the company's history. Arthur threw a celebratory dinner for him at their sprawling estate. The air was thick with sycophantic praise. Arthur stood to give a toast. His chest puffed out with pride. "To my son Elijah," he boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous dining room. Some people have to learn business. Others, the truly gifted ones, are born with it. Elijah has an innate, God-given business acumen that I haven't seen since my own father founded this company. I sat there, a fixed smile on my face, my stomach churning with a bitter, silent rage. Innate business acumen. 'Twas a lie. A complete and utter fabrication. Elijah's biggest recent success, the deal that had supposedly sealed his promotion, was the acquisition of a smaller energy company in Texas. The deal had been incredibly risky, hinging on the geological stability of their primary asset, a massive shale field. The Titan geological team had been split on it. It was I who had stayed up with Elijah for 3 nights straight, poring over the seismic data he couldn't decipher, building a risk assessment model that showed the field was far more stable than his own team believed. I had simplified the complex geological reports into a series of easily digestible bullet points and charts for his final presentation. I had essentially handed him the key to the entire deal on a silver platter. He had taken the credit without a backward glance, without a single word of acknowledgement, not even in private. And here he was being lauded for his innate talent, while I, the true architect of his success, was expected to sit there and applaud. I felt like a ghostwriter at the author's award ceremony, completely invisible. The applause for him felt like a physical assault. That night, I went home and worked on my North Ridge project with a cold, clear fury. The humiliation was a crucible, burning away the last vestiges of my hope that I could ever find a place for myself within the Vance family or their corporate empire. Lena was right. My work was not just research anymore. It was my weapon. It was my way out. The final act was set at the company's annual leadership retreat. It was the pinnacle of the corporate calendar, a 3-day affair at a ridiculously opulent mountain resort. The theme, dripping with unself-aware irony, was Titan Energy, a vision for the future. It was a future that, from all their presentations and breakout sessions, looked exactly like the past, only with more efficient oil extraction and better PR. I was there, of course, as an accessory. While Elijah attended high-level strategy meetings, I was relegated to the SPOUS program, a series of excruciatingly dull activities that included a wine tasting, a mindfulness seminar, and a guided tour of the resort's art collection. I felt like a show pony, trotted out for the cocktail hours and formal dinners to smile and nod and reflect well on my husband. Elijah was in his element. He moved through the crowds of executives with the easy grace of a young prince, accepting congratulations on his promotion, his hand always resting lightly on the small of my back in a gesture that looked like affection but felt like ownership. He was the golden boy, the future of the company, the living embodiment of his father's legacy. I was a footnote in his story, and the ink was fading fast. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that something had to break. I just didn't realize how spectacularly it would happen. The retreat culminated in a grand awards dinner held in a ballroom that was a symphony of crystal chandeliers and ostentatious flower arrangements. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and self-congratulation. One by one, executives were called to the stage to receive awards for excellence in leadership, innovative marketing, and record-breaking profits. My name, of course, was never mentioned. I hadn't expected it to be. I sat at our table, a polite, fixed smile on my face, clapping at the appropriate moments. Then came the big one. A special Rising Star Award created just for this year was presented to Elijah. He strode to the stage to a standing ovation, accepting the heavy crystal trophy with a practiced humility that made my stomach turn. He gave a short, charming speech, thanking his father, the board, and his incredible team. He even remembered to thank his beautiful, supportive wife Ari, which earned me a smattering of patronizing applause. I felt my smile tighten, the muscles in my jaw aching from the strain. After the main awards were done, Arthur Vance, flushed with wine and paternal pride, strode back to the podium. "Friends, colleagues," he boomed, his voice echoing through the vast room. "Before we open the dance floor, there's one last little presentation I'd like to make." He paused for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed directly on me. A slow, indulgent smile spread across his face. "This one is for my lovely daughter-in-law, Dr. Ariana Reyes." He used my full title, and the way he said it, with a mocking emphasis, turned it into an insult. We all know how much Ari loves her geology, how much she loves her rocks. A wave of sycophantic chuckles rippled through the audience. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me. My blood ran cold. Elijah, sitting beside me, leaned in and whispered, "Just play along, it's just Dad being Dad." He squeezed my hand, but it wasn't a gesture of support. It was a warning. Arthur beckoned me to the stage. "Come on up, Ari. Don't be shy." My legs felt like lead as I stood up and walked the long, lonely path to the stage, the spotlight following me like a hunter's scope. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A junior executive scurried forward, handing Arthur a small, square box wrapped in black velvet. "We didn't want you to feel left out tonight," Arthur said, his voice dripping with condescension as he handed me the box. "So we got you a little something for your collection." The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't cruel, malicious laughter from most of them. It was the easy, thoughtless laughter of people who saw a harmless joke, a father-in-law gently ribbing his daughter-in-law about her quaint little hobby. They couldn't see the exquisite cruelty of it. They couldn't see that he was publicly reducing my entire life's work, my passion, my very identity, to a childish pastime. My hands trembled as I opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of cheap satin, was a piece of polished agate. It was a generic, multicolored stone, the kind sold in the hotel gift shop for $20. I could see the faint, sticky residue on the bottom where a price tag had been hastily peeled off. Pretty rock. A worthless, meaningless, pretty rock. I looked up from the stone to Arthur's smug, beaming face. Then I looked out into the crowd and saw my husband. Elijah was smiling, a broad, handsome smile, giving me a little nod as if to say, "*C. Isn't this fun?" And in that single shattering moment, every compromise I had ever made, every piece of myself I had chipped away, every silent humiliation I had swallowed, coalesced into a single point of unbearable pressure. And then it broke. But it didn't break into tears or hysterics. It broke into a profound, glacial calm. The roaring in my ears stopped. The frantic bird in my chest grew still. I saw everything with a sudden, diamond-hard clarity. These people would never see me. They were incapable of it. To them I would always be a decoration, an amusing hobbyist, a footnote. And I was done. I was done trying to earn the respect of people who had none to give. I turned back to the podium, where Arthur had left the microphone live. The laughter was just beginning to die down, the audience expecting me to give a flustered, girlish thank you. I leaned into the microphone. The room fell silent. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. My voice was not the quiet, hesitant voice they were used to. It was steady, clear, and cold as ice. It carried to every corner of the ballroom. This is a beautiful and powerful reminder. I paused, holding up the cheap agate for all to see. A reminder of how some things and some people are valued. My eyes met his, and I saw a flicker of confusion in them. And it's a reminder of what is truly worthless. I then looked directly at Elijah, whose smile had frozen on his face. I've been reminded tonight of my own value. The value I assigned to myself before I ever walked into this building. I gently placed the polished rock on the podium, next to Elijah's heavy crystal trophy. It looked small and insignificant, but in that moment, it felt like the weightiest object in the room. Which is why I am resigning from Titan Energy. Effective immediately. I turned without another word and walked off the stage. I didn't run. I walked with a deliberate, unhurried pace, my back straight, my head held high. I walked past my table, past Elijah's shocked, disbelieving face, past Arthur's slack-jawed expression, and straight towards the ballroom doors. The silence that followed me was absolute. It was a dense, heavy, shocked silence, more profound than any applause. I didn't look back. I pushed open the heavy doors and walked out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind me. I was finally terrifyingly, gloriously free. I didn't stop walking until I reached my hotel room. The adrenaline that had propelled me through the ballroom was still coursing through my veins, a clean, cold fire. I moved with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, pulling my suitcase from the closet and throwing my clothes inside. There was no deliberation, no second-guessing. Every action felt preordained, the only possible next step on a path that had just been illuminated. An hour later, Elijah burst into the room. His face, usually so composed, was a mask of livid fury. "What in the hell was that?" he spat, slamming the door behind him. "Are you insane? You didn't just walk out, Ariana. You detonated a bomb in the middle of my life. You publicly humiliated my father." I paused in my packing, folding a blouse with careful precision. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. The man I thought I loved was a stranger, a furious child whose toy had been broken. "No, Elijah," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I didn't humiliate your father. Your father humiliated me. He has been humiliating me since the day we met. You just never noticed because it didn't affect you." He scoffed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It was a joke. A harmless little joke. My God, can't you take a joke?" "It stopped being a joke," I replied, snapping the latches on my suitcase shut, when I realized the punchline was my entire professional life. The only person I embarrassed tonight was myself, forever believing that my work, that I, could ever be respected here. His anger curdled into something uglier. Pleading, manipulative. "Ari, think about what you're doing. You're throwing everything away. Our life, our future. Our future." I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You mean your future? The one where I stand quietly by your side and applaud your innate business acumen, while my own brilliance gathers dust in a drawer? No thank you. I'm going to go build my own future now." The finality in my voice seemed to finally penetrate his rage. He stared at me, his expression shifting to one of cold, calculating fury. The mask was off. This was the real Elijah. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with venom. Go play with your little rocks. You'll come crawling back in a month when you realize you can't make it without me." I picked up my suitcase and walked to the door. "Don't hold your breath," I said, and walked out without looking back. The divorce papers were filed a week later. The first person I called after leaving the resort was Lena. I reached her in the middle of the night. "I did it," I said, my voice raw. "I quit." I heard a slow smile in her voice when she replied, "Good. Now the real work begins." Lena was more than a mentor. She was a force of nature. Within a day, she had made 2 calls. The first was to a razor-sharp patent lawyer who specialized in intellectual property and green technology. The second was to a venture capitalist named Julian Croft, a maverick investor known for backing high-risk, high-reward projects that traditional firms were too timid to touch. My first meeting with Julian was terrifying. He was a lean, intense man who listened with an unnerving stillness. I had my data, my models, my secret research on the North Ridge property. I laid it all out for him in a borrowed conference room Lena had arranged. I explained the science, the heat gradients, the immense, untapped power source. He listened for an hour without saying a word, his eyes boring into me, searching for any hint of weakness or uncertainty. When I finished, he leaned back. "The science is compelling, Dr. Reyes," he said. "But the land is owned by Titan Energy. They're not going to just sell their golden goose to a startup run by the founder's estranged daughter-in-law." "They don't know it's a golden goose," I countered, my voice steady. "To them, it's a dead asset, a line item on a tax form. They wrote it off 30 years ago, and their institutional arrogance won't let them revisit that decision. They think it's worthless." My plan was simple and audacious. We would form a shell corporation with an innocuous name, Prairie Holdings LLC, and make an offer to buy the land. We would offer slightly above its assessed worthless value, enough to make it an easy, no-brainer decision for Titan's accounting department to offload a non-performing asset. It was a massive gamble. If they got even a whisper of why I wanted it, they would lock it down forever. Julian was silent for a long time. Then a slow grin spread across his face. "I like it," he said. "It's bold. Dangerous. Let's do it." He agreed to provide the seed money. My life savings, combined with his initial investment, was just enough to make the purchase and fund the first phase of exploratory drilling. I was betting everything I had on the data I had found while performing a job meant to humiliate me. The next few months were a blur of frantic, exhilarating work. My startup, which I named Reyes Geothermal, consisted of me, Lena acting as an unpaid senior advisor, and 2 brilliant young engineers she had recommended from the university. Our office was a cramped, rented space with mismatched furniture and a coffee maker that was perpetually on. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap pizza and a shared electrifying sense of purpose. The Shell Corporation made the offer for the North Ridge land. As I predicted, it was accepted without a second thought. I signed the final papers with a trembling hand. The land that held my future was now mine. The first exploratory drill was the moment of truth. We all stood on the cold, wind-swept property, a place that looked barren and unremarkable to the naked eye. The drill bit into the earth, its whining sound a prayer to the deep heat below. Hours turned into a day, then 2. The tension was unbearable. Our entire future, Julian's investment, my reputation, it all rested on what that drill found. On the 3rd morning, one of the engineers came running from the monitoring trailer, his face pale with shock. "You need to see this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The thermal readings, they're off the charts." We crowded around the monitor. The numbers scrolling across the screen were unbelievable. My models hadn't been optimistic enough. The geothermal reservoir was even larger, more stable, and more powerful than I had dared to dream. We hadn't just found a gold mine. We had found the mother lode. News of a significant geothermal strike in the region began to leak out through industry channels. The rumors were vague at first. Titan Energy, I heard through back channels, was aware of them. A source told me that Arthur Vance himself had heard about the little startup drilling up north, and had laughed it off in a board meeting. "That girl's little hobby," he'd reportedly called it. "Let her play in her sandbox." The condescension was familiar, but this time it didn't sting. It was rocket fuel. The year that followed was the most challenging and rewarding of my life. Securing the land and confirming the geothermal source was only the beginning. Now we had to build an entire company from the ground up. We were a tiny fish in an ocean of corporate sharks, and Titan Energy was the great white. We worked with a lean, ferocious intensity, attracting a small team of brilliant, dedicated engineers and geophysicists who were drawn to our mission. They were rebels and idealists, people who had grown tired of the fossil fuel industry's inertia and wanted to build something new, something clean. Our tiny, cluttered office became a hub of innovation, a stark contrast to the stagnant, politically charged atmosphere I had escaped. Then came the announcement that changed everything. The state government, under a new, progressive administration, launched a landmark initiative to transition a significant portion of the state's power grid to renewable energy sources by the end of the decade. To kickstart the program, they were opening up bids for a massive state contract, the right to build and operate a new power plant that would supply clean energy to a quarter of the state's population. It was one of the largest public energy contracts in the nation's history. It was a battle cry for the future of energy in the region. Every major player in the sector immediately began scrambling to put together a bid. Titan Energy, of course, was the frontrunner. Their proposal was predictable and powerful. A new, state-of-the-art natural gas power plant. It was technically a fossil fuel, but they marketed it as a cleaner bridging fuel. A safe, reliable choice from a company with a long history. Their bid was backed by an army of lobbyists and a public relations campaign that cost more than my company's entire valuation. They were the incumbent, the safe bet. On the other side was Reyes Geothermal, a tiny, unknown startup with a radical, unproven idea. We put together our bid. It wasn't slick or glossy. It was just data. Hard, irrefutable data on the massive, stable, and completely clean energy source bubbling just beneath the surface of the North Ridge property. We proposed a geothermal power plant that would be cheaper to run, produce zero emissions, and provide consistent power for the next century. On paper, our proposal was superior in every way. But we were David, and Titan was a Goliath with a 9-figure marketing budget. The day the State Energy Commission was set to announce the winner, the atmosphere in the Capitol building's main press hall was electric. The room was packed with journalists, industry analysts, and politicians. I stood with my small team at the back of the room. I saw the Titan Energy delegation near the front. Arthur Vance was there, looking regal and supremely confident. He was standing next to Elijah. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the crowded room. I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Not regret, but a kind of smug pity. He still thought I was playing in a sandbox. He had no idea I had built a fortress. The State Energy Secretary, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Eleanor Vance, no relation thankfully, walked to the podium. She spoke about the state's commitment to a sustainable future, about the need for bold, innovative solutions. Then she opened the envelope. After a thorough review of all proposals, she announced, her voice ringing with authority, based on long-term cost, environmental impact, and energy stability, the Commission has made a unanimous decision. A hush fell over the room. The Titan executives leaned forward, smiles already forming on their faces. The contract is awarded, she declared, to Reyes Geothermal. For a moment there was complete silence. Then the room exploded. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions. My team erupted in cheers, hugging each other, tears streaming down their faces. I felt a dizzying wave of vindication wash over me. I looked towards the front of the room. The Titan delegation was frozen in place. The confident smiles had vanished, replaced by masks of stunned, ashen disbelief. Arthur Vance looked like he had been physically struck. Elijah was staring at me. His mouth slightly agape, the color drained from his face. In that moment he finally understood. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't a joke. This was an empire crumbling, and I was the one who had laid the foundation for its replacement. The aftermath was swift and brutal for them. The news of the contract sent shockwaves through the financial markets. Titan Energy's stock plummeted by 30% overnight. Their entire fossil fuel division, already facing pressure from changing regulations, suddenly looked obsolete, a relic from a bygone era. My quiet, data-driven victory had done more damage to their bottom line than any hostile takeover ever could. The media swarmed me, the unlikely victor, the geologist who took on Goliath. I didn't need to say a word about my past with the company. The story told itself. A year passed. Reyes Geothermal was no longer a tiny startup. We were a major energy provider, expanding rapidly, hiring hundreds of people, and building a future I had once only dreamed of. My divorce from Elijah was finalized. He and his father had attempted to reach out a few times after their public humiliation. Their messages weren't apologies. They were clumsy, transparent attempts to somehow get a piece of my success, veiled as offers to let bygones be bygones and explore potential synergies. I deleted them without replying. There was nothing left to say. My CEO office overlooks the city, and on my desk, right next to a picture of my laughing, triumphant team, sits a polished piece of agate. It's not a trophy. It's not a reminder of humiliation. It's the opposite. It's a reminder that my greatest strength was born from the very thing they tried to use to diminish me. They handed me a pretty rock, and I used it to show them what the whole world was really made of. Looking back on it all, the most important lesson I learned wasn't about geology or business. It was about value. For so long I had allowed other people, my husband, his family, my colleagues, to define my worth. I measured myself by their standards, and I always came up short. The humiliation of that night at the retreat was a painful but necessary gift. It shattered the illusion that their validation was something I needed or even wanted. It forced me to find my value within myself, in my knowledge, in my passion, and in my refusal to be small. Being underestimated can feel like a curse, but I've learned that it can be a superpower. When people don't see you coming, when they dismiss you as a hobbyist or a decoration, they leave the door wide open for you to walk right in and change the world while they're not looking. My real victory wasn't the state contract or the money. It was the moment I realized I didn't need their applause to know I was brilliant. Now I want to hear from you all. So many of you have faced your own versions of being underestimated, of having your passion dismissed as a little hobby. Share your story in the comments below. How did you reclaim your value? How did you prove the doubters wrong? Your stories inspire me and everyone else in this community. And if my journey resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding your power. Share this with anyone you know who might need to be reminded that their worth is not up for debate. Thank you so much for joining me and for listening to my story. I wish you all the strength to build your own empires, no matter how small they tell you you are. Remember, sometimes the best revenge is building something they said was impossible.